Been Rishi Sunak's first week as Prime Minister. We've seen a new look cabinet and his first outing at Prime Minister's Questions. So to discuss how well he started, we're delighted to be joined by the former leader of the Conservative Party, Iain Duncan Smith. Iain, thanks for joining us this morning. How do you rate Rishi's first week in the job?
Oh, Phil, Esther. Well, you know, he did pretty well, I thought. Certainly in the show, as it were, of the street theatre of Prime Minister's Questions time. I think he did well. Actually, I thought that the Labour leader missed a few possible open goals and fumbled some of his words, so that helped him, I think. But yeah, I think the sense of desire for calm and a bit more unity, I think, got everybody behind him, so that always helps as well. Having stood at the dispatch box when there's nobody cheering behind you, it's a pretty lonely place, I have to tell you.
And there was lots of cheering behind. Even the Speaker had to tell people to stop. I think it was kicking the chairs and furniture in front. So it did seem a very positive mood there. But things will get difficult as time moves on. Obviously, we work together. You were the Secretary of State of the Department of Work and Pensions. And it seems there's two sort of issues there, aren't they, bubbling up? And that is increasing benefits in line with inflation and the triple lock. And that seems to be really will be a big part of the new financial statement.
Yeah, can I just say that at least kicking the furniture is a step in the right direction, because up until now we've been kicking each other, really. So I suppose that's one positive step, you could say. On the other side, yeah, there are really big challenges now facing him. So that was easy street this week, really. And now it just gets more difficult. And the big issue is going to be the government is on a course to reduce spending and possibly raise taxes. And I have real concerns about a couple of those issues. One is that if the recent Purchase Manager Index, the PMI index, which is it tells all the people that are buying things and making things in companies, they now tell what they're buying, what they're not buying. And their forecast now is down into recession. And that's normally a few months before we actually hit that as an economy. And what that tells you now is his room for maneuver at the budget is now very tight and quite limited. So, for example, if he chooses to raise taxes, whilst he might in the short term get some revenue, in fact, in truth, he's more likely to increase the deficit and push us deeper into recession. That's a simple fact of life, because the higher the taxes are, the less business there'll be, the less business there is, there's less revenues, fewer revenues, higher deficit, and getting out of that will be difficult. On spending cuts, he has departmental ones, and I think he can get a fair and reasonable amount out of departments, which still have a long way to go since the amount of money that was given to them during COVID. But the one area he simply cannot think of going to at the moment is to try and cut the overall benefit charge, which is due to come up in line with inflation next April, based on what the inflation rates are this September. Bear in mind that for a number of years now, benefits have gone below inflation. The last one is at least 3.5% below inflation. So they've already been squeezed pretty tight. I would look at, most importantly, reviewing the whole sickness benefit culture, which has got an extra 500,000 people on it since COVID and 1.6 million people languishing on benefits that don't require any work incentive. Change all of that, get to work with people, get them the right treatment, get them back to work. That's going to save a lot more money than trying to do a top-down squeeze.
So on the triple lock for pensioners, Iain, do you think that the triple lock should be retained or not?
Well, we have a problem here, don't we? Because at the time in the budget, at the time of the manifesto, the Conservative Party made an outright pledge that this would not be changed. So it makes it difficult. If you start breaking manifesto pledges, the public does get to realise that. And the second thing is, you can argue right now that they are the group that has the least flexibility to be able to change their income. They're not like working age adults that can get to work or can do part-time work. Most pensioners are a large chunk beyond the idea of the triple lock. He could possibly look at age-related changes so that we know that people are living longer now. And so you could say that at a later age, beyond sort of 68, 69, people would have their full triple lock. Others might have slightly less. There are options there which they can look at. But in truth, these are not easy options one way or the other. And so that's why I say getting people back to work is their biggest chance to actually reduce the overall costs and get people paying taxes, which is critical.
Iain Duncan Smith, thank you very much indeed for joining us this morning. Thank you. We appreciate it.
Now, with us in the studio is Henry Hill, the Deputy Editor of Conservative Home, and GBNews political reporter Olivia Utley. So this is going to be a knotty issue, isn't it, what they're going to do in that benefits department. Iain touched upon it there, the triple lock, a 2019 manifesto sort of pledge, and now people are saying we might not be doing it as they looked for £50 billion worth of savings.
Yeah, this was the problem all the way back. Even at party conference, you would be talking to advisors in the very short-lived Truss government, and it was apparent how big a problem this was going to be, because the only way that you can get to cuts of that scale is by going after the big spending departments. It's by going after health, education, benefits. So there's no way of avoiding that. The question is, what do you do? Now, as you say, the pension triple lock, one, it's a manifesto commitment. Two, older voters are the Conservative Party's most loyal voters, so they're probably not going to touch that. But if you don't touch that, are you taking it out of health? You've got a COVID backlog to clear. Are you taking it out of schools? Tory MPs have spent years fighting for new funding formulas for their schools. I don't think they're going to take that either. So it's going to be incredibly difficult for the Prime Minister to find a cuts package that matters. And in fact, it might end up being the case that his great friend here is the fact that Boris Johnson repealed the Fixed Term Parliaments Act. So actually, if the Chancellor brings forward a package that Tory MPs don't like, unlike in the last Parliament, Rishi Sunak can say, this is a confidence issue. Either you pass my autumn statement or we go to the country.
And Olivia, I guess whenever the government proposes any spending cuts, somebody somewhere, quite a few people say, well, we're not going to support that. I'm sure that'll be the case with the triple lock. So that therefore leaves tax rises to plug the gap. But I can't see them being particularly popular on the Conservative benches either.
No, it's going to be some sort of very unpalatable combination of tax rises and spending cuts. I think that one issue is that Labour has managed to consolidate their position, and they did so well with that fracking debate last week in pushing through that vote, doing that opposition day motion and pushing through that vote on fracking. Tory MPs had to decide whether to support the government or whether to vote against the government with Labour, but in a way that would please their constituents, who on the whole don't much like fracking. Now, if you imagine that Labour decides to do that with measures that are being put through in the fiscal event in November, you've got Tory MPs having to make the choice of whether to vote with the government or whether to absolutely infuriate their constituents by voting for cuts in health, defence, education. And if you imagine Tory MPs sitting there thinking about their constituents, turning on the news and watching their MP vote through the Yes lobby for cutting school funding by X, Y, Z, it becomes very, very difficult. You've then also got Tory MPs, Iain Duncan Smith was sort of hinting at it there, of his mindset, of the kind of Truss mindset, of supply-side reforms are the only way to influence growth. And Rishi Sunak has already backtracked on fracking, and there are probably other measures like that which would save a little bit if he can cut out any serious supply-side reform. So that's going to go down badly with a sort of different set of Conservative MPs. So I think that this party unity that we've all been talking so much about could actually fracture relatively soon.
Well, Lord Frost and other people are saying this isn't what's going to really upset the Tory MPs and the country. It is not getting a grip on the immigration issue. This is now what will unite the party and get the country behind you. Do you think that's right, looking at what's happening here? Henry?
I think that this is one of the things that's slightly depressing about Rishi's launch, is that his team are now saying that they're not going to be making any substantial changes to the machinery of government, which is really disappointing for me, because during his leadership campaign, he promised fundamental reform of the Home Office. And I think actually, whatever your position on immigration, it's now clear that we do need it, because yes, the Conservatives have been failing to get a grip on immigration, especially illegal crossings, for some time. That's absolutely corrosive to public trust in government. It doesn't matter if you have a Home Secretary who's in there with the tough rhetoric and the tough language. The voters know that by now. But if year after year you come back and you're like, actually the numbers are higher, oh yeah, no, the numbers are higher again, then you're not going to get people supporting you. So actually, I should say, had a short paper out with the Adam Smith Institute today calling for the Home Office to be broken into an immigration ministry and a security ministry, so you can have a dedicated Secretary of State focusing on those immigration issues. It is going to be hugely important for the Conservatives at the next election to prove to their voters they've got a grip on this. And I don't think, based on previous experience, the current arrangement is going to do it.
and that was a good paper, and I totally agree that they should be. It's such a huge issue, it'd be good to separate that out. And when you've got, as we've got here in the Times, page 4 and 5, people now living in Dover saying they feel scared in their own home because they've got immigrants. As they wake up in the morning, they're coming downstairs and they've sort of broken into their home and sitting in the kitchen. It is a big, big issue.
I mean, Olivia, I think David Frost is right, isn't he? That actually we see it in our post bag, we see it from the messages that we get from the viewers, the dinghies coming over from France. This is really, really upsetting the public massively. I guess the controversial part of Rishi's first week was his reappointment of Suella Braverman as the Home Secretary. But I guess amongst many people, lots of people think she's the best person to try and tackle that, and his future probably depends on that, doesn't it?
Yeah, I think his future very much is tied up with Suella Braverman's future now, because he didn't promote Kemi Badenoch, who was the other sort of hero of the right of the Conservative Party. The right of the Conservative Party have thrown their hopes behind Suella Braverman, and so have a lot of Conservative voters who think that she is the only person who will be able to tackle immigration. There were rumours I heard that Rishi Sunak wasn't thinking of keeping her in power for that long, and that he's put Jenrick in the Home Office to kind of keep an eye on her, and he's sort of thinking of only rumours, but he was thinking of a reshuffle next year, early next year. That surely can't be possible, because what Conservative voters want is Suella Braverman sorting out immigration. I think
Olivia, can I just interrupt there, saying how dangerous that is for within a department for somebody junior to think that they're getting that role? Can you see how that would destabilise it and take power away from the person who's there?
Absolutely. And I think, that's quite a worry for quite a lot of people in the Conservative Party. I think another concern that I've heard is actually just how little we've heard from Rishi Sunak about immigration, and actually how little we've heard about many domestic issues at all. Obviously, we are in the middle of an economic crisis, but all we've really heard from both this leadership contest and the last one is talk about tax and spend, which is incredibly important. But you have to dig quite deep to kind of find out what Rishi Sunak thinks about a whole host of social issues, including, the Telford gangs, the rape gangs. He's been... Now, you did that fantastic interview with him where he spoke about it, but issues like that don't seem to be given very much air at all. And I think there's a bit of a worry that Rishi Sunak manages to kind of put together a package of perfectly sensible reforms to taxing and spending and gets the books in order, but sort of doesn't really manage to do anything else. And then you get to a kind of general election stage, and he's done he's answered all the what questions, what's he going to do, but he hasn't really answered why. So what's the kind of narrative for voting Conservative? And I think immigration plays a huge part in that. So unless he sorts out that...
There's definitely a narrative coming up at the moment, though. He's not going to be at COP27, is he? He's saying he can't. He's got other things to do. He's taken Alex Sharma out of the cabinet, so he's putting forward a narrative there.
Yes, I think so. And I think there's been a lot of... I mean, if you look at Twitter this morning, you'd think that bowing out of COP27 was this huge fiasco and that he's going to be, massively judged by the public for doing that. I think that quite a lot of people think the opposite, actually, that we've had, COP26, they said they couldn't have another one of these COP meetings because they'd failed in their mission or whatever they said, and now they're just having another one. And I think no one can quite work out why politicians go to these sort of huge climate jamborees every 6 months or so. So I think actually that's going to win Rishi Sunak quite a lot of political points. And if it gives him the kind of bandwidth and headroom to be able to start talking about domestic policies, then that would be hugely beneficial to his premiership.
Olivia, Henry, thank you very much for that.